Ladies and gentlemen, RosterWatch Nation, welcome back to the epic RosterWatch Podcast, brought to you by RosterWatch.com. My name is Alex Dunlap, joined today by Byron Lambert. And Byron, we have the PPR version of the cheat sheet up, brother. What the hell's going on?
Oh, man, just getting fired up here for hopefully a return to normalcy with training camps this year, man. I've been thinking about it a lot, and pretty soon, hopefully you start getting an idea of what that's going to look like. I think it's probably going to be an East Coast trip this year, just logistically, but going to find out what's possible soon.
Going to be hanging out with all of your coastal elites out there on the East Coast.
It's hard not to go coastal when you have the opportunity, man.
All right, so let's talk here about the cheat sheet. I want to do a couple of simulations here using version 1.3 just to kind of show you how things are going. But before we do, there's just a couple of issues in particular that I wanted to talk to you about and see if we can get ironed out. So let's just get into them. A quick reminder to the listeners: if you're enjoying the podcast, please like it and whatever. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. It could help us greatly if you do so. Leave a comment, etc. And then if you're listening in Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts, if you could leave us a rating and a review, that would be greatly appreciated. It would be very helpful, and it'll help us to get more content out like this. All right, so let's just start out at the running back position. Here's the question that I have for you, Byron. With the reporting now that's coming out about Saquon Barkley from Jordan Renan, he's talking about it wouldn't be realistic for the team to kind of put everything on his plate the same way that they would have maybe to start the 2020 season in 2021 as he returns from injury and what they plan on doing with him long-term. It could take a while for him to get up to speed as far as the volume that we expect, as far as just the monster volume. Does this do anything for you? It makes me wonder if maybe Ezekiel Elliott should be ahead of Saquon Barkley on the cheat sheet. I'd just like to hear your thoughts on that, if you think that's crazy. This is PPR, so we do know the upside that Saquon Barkley does bring in that area, but we also have a bunch of new receiving weapons that are going to be in tow there for the New York Giants, namely Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, Kyle Rudolph, et cetera, to maybe snipe off some of those targets that could have previously gone to the running back. What do you think about Zeke, who certainly is going after Barkley as far as ADP, being ahead of Barkley on the cheat sheet? Or is it better just to let ADP settle that thing and get some exposure to Saquon and some exposure to Zeke, but maybe not quite as much?
Well, the first thing that stands out to me is I'm a little bit surprised that Zeke is going this high at this point, given what we saw unfold last year. I'm sure people think there's going to be some kind of bounce back from that, presumably for a lot of good reasons. But I was expecting to see maybe last year's travails baked into his early ADP a little bit more. I mean, I see guys like Jonathan Taylor and Aaron Jones right behind him who, at first glance, I might actually prefer more this year, obviously pinning the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay. But you're asking about Barkley and Zeke. I think that's enough to move Barkley down a few spots. I mean, I look at this list, and I like everybody on the top of the list here at the running back position until you get down to that Joe Mixon territory. I could be tempted to take any of those guys over a Barkley if I think he's a little bit injured or not going to come out of the gate hot, which we value very, very much at RosterWatch, a fast start.
Do you worry at all about – so you're not worried at all about Jonathan Taylor? I know we think Marlon Mack sucks, but he is coming back. They have acted like they're going to play him. Nyheim Hines, et cetera, et cetera. Jonathan Taylor was a brutal own last year as far as fantasy is concerned. If you had to be with him through the whole season, you're not at all worried about Jonathan Taylor. You think he just comes in and it's just back to gangbusters?
I mean, this is what they drafted him for. Year 2, running back, breakout, hot the second part of the season. A guy with mileage on the tires coming out of Wisconsin. You're not necessarily trying to save him. I mean, he looked like the best skill player on the offense down the stretch last year, and I would expect him to improve over the course of this offseason. So, I mean, it's not that he doesn't come out with any risk, but most backfields are some sort of committee at this point. I mean, even Zeke, you can argue about how much Pollard may or may not get involved this year. So I think when you're talking about Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines, it's nothing to get too concerned about. I mean, Jonathan Taylor's still a player that I think we should be very, very fond of heading into this season.
One of the last questions I'm going to ask you before we start doing these simulations, Byron, just so you can start thinking about it now, is which players down the sheet, whenever you sort of look at the sheet where we basically have guys right now like Elijah Moore and Marvin Jones and Mecole Hardman, these type of players, if you can look at where their current slotting on the sheet on version 1.2, right around there, what players do you think from below them need to be moved up to where they're getting consideration there with that 14th round pick in 12 team leagues? Okay, so I'll ask you that at some point. But before, I wanted to ask you about Davante Adams. Right now, I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers, and so I feel safer with taking Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, maybe even Calvin Ridley over him. But now with the Julio Jones stuff, plus the stuff coming out about Calvin Ridley, he's had foot surgery. I wonder if that maybe dings him a little bit. How do you see, and DeAndre Hopkins, I think, should be in consideration within that tier. But how do you see that tier playing out? What do we need to do with Davante Adams, and how does the Calvin Ridley stuff affect his slotting within that tier? Because I think he still belongs in that tier at the very top as far as those top five. I feel good about those top five. How do you see it breaking down? And most specifically, Davante Adams, how would you be treating him right now with the Aaron Rodgers stuff still up in the air? And Calvin Ridley, how much does the reports of the foot issue bother you?
Well, I think Davante Adams is going to be fine because I think Aaron Rodgers is going to play this season as a Green Bay Packer. I've thought that most of this was posturing the entire offseason, and at this point, mostly this doesn't typically result in some kind of trade right on the eve of training camp or something. I get there could be some form of a holdout early that could kind of penalize Adams owners, but I think if you bake in the idea that I'd say Rodgers in my mind is notably more than a 50% to return. I think probably, up in that 75, 85, 90% range to return. And, then the next question I'd ask myself
if he's 85 or 90% to return, I mean, he should be either wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2, I would think, right? If we're going to be talking 85 to 90%, it's a pretty good shot, right? It's a pretty good shot.
Yeah, I think you got to figure out how many games maybe he'll sit out. I can't imagine it'll be that many because he wants to win. I mean, he's coming off the MVP. They got a good team that's in contention. I know he wants to get one last payday, which is what I suspect most of this is about. But, how many games can he really afford to sit out without kind of submarining his own aspirations? So I think the other question is, look, then now we're just talking about Davante Adams strictly. I know we're not entirely sure what to expect from Jordan Love yet. And I think you and I have a little bit differing opinions on him potentially as just, his prospect profile. But, we're still talking about Davante Adams. I mean, is Davante Adams with an unknown quarterback commodity? I mean, how much worse is that than Calvin Ridley with a Matt Ryan? Davante Adams, he still might be pretty damn good, even with another quarterback, just because it's Davante and he's kind of the centerpiece of that passing offense. And, you would think they would pivot to the run a little bit more if a guy like Love comes in, but then there's the chance they could be playing from behind more with him at the helm, which ultimately could kind of, boomerang back around to Adams. So I think if you bake all that in, man, I can still make a pretty strong case for Davante Adams as a top 3, especially if we have some kind of – Calvin Ridley's the kind of player that you don't want that guy too banged up, man.
Yeah, I agree. When I heard about the foot thing, it really did kind of worry me. So that's something that I'll go through and remedy. I think we'll at least get – I'm on version 1.
I mean, shouldn't we be getting Russell Gage late anyways? So it's like – maybe you take a crack at Adams here, a pretty even distribution between Adams and Ridley, maybe according to ADP, and then at least you can make a save with Gage late if,
What about Hopkins?
Adams gets nudged.
What about Hopkins versus Ridley?
I mean, that's a toss-up to me. I mean, I think the safe thing is to go with Hopkins. He's sick and he's in a burgeoning offense with Kyler Murray. I mean, clearly he was at times missing in action last year. So I think you start to wonder about that. We're starting to get a little bit longer in the tooth with Hopkins. And then, you do factor in, they drafted Rondell Moore, who they brought in, AJ Green. They've still got Christian Kirk. I'm forgive me if there's somebody else I'm forgetting that they might have brought in. I mentioned Rondale. The tight end position, I don't have it right up in front of me right now, but that's not like that. I mean, that wasn't a real
or what isn't damn. They still have Max Williams.
It wasn't a real position of focus for them last year. I mean, it was Dan Arnold coming in down the stretch last year, but I don't think you worry about that. So, I don't know. I guess the interesting question is, what does AJ Green do to this equation? I mean, he may just be a terrific decoy to open Hopkins up a lot more. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting what Arizona's done, bringing in Watt and bringing in AJ Green, because those feel like win now moves. So you know what? I think they're going to be a good team, and that means that we should still like DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay, so I will make that update here to the cheat sheet, and we get that input in here to run a simulation here in a second. One of the other things is, Byron, there's this area of the draft that you'll see in these simulations where it feels like we're trying to get a little bit of Damian Harris, we're trying to get some Trey Sermon, some Michael Carter, and some Gus Edwards in the same area where we're kind of pushing up guys like Antonio Brown, who you're interested in, Laviska Shenault, who we've continued to get a bunch of good news about out of Jaguars camp. There's been reporting that he's just looked so good. The report that came out today from Sports Illustrated saying that Laviska Shenault, they're trying to work him as a true as a true wide receiver, and maybe not the kind of chess piece weapon, the gadget weapon that we had always envisioned for him coming out. So in that area, how do you Damian Harris, Trey Sermon, Michael Carter, Gus Edwards, how do you view them? I mean, I think that the ADP basically falls in that order. Do you think that's fine, or should one of those guys get moved up to where we're getting them more often?
Well, I mean, me, I'm a Gus Edwards guy, so I always make that case. Hopefully his ADP hasn't been skyrocketing too much during the offseason.
It hasn't.
Well, that's good news. So I think we need to be very, very bullish on Gus Edwards as long as he's not becoming overpriced. His ADP hasn't been rising too rapidly. If it's still kind of in the same pocket that it's generally been in most of the offseason, I'm surprised, because to me, there's been a bit of hype around that at this point, but I guess it's just gotten lost in the mix. So yeah, I still just love Gus Edwards. I think it's a great draft pick late. And then, the only thing I might say about Trey Sermon is I'm still a little bit interested in maybe getting a little bit of Elijah Mitchell late. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I wouldn't mind having a little bit of a mix between those two guys late, rather than being all in on maybe Trey Sermon and no Elijah Mitchell.
Okay, well, I'll make a note here about Elijah Mitchell in the 1.3 that I'm working on right now that I'll be updating it to. So let's get to the question I asked you a little bit earlier. What about these guys with the 14th round picks? What I've been trying to do lately, speaking of Elijah's, I've been interested in getting Elijah Moore, just with how good he's been looking at practice. You get from the New York Jets beat saying he looks like he's the best player on the offense already. I was under the impression that Jamison Crowder would surely be gone because they could I forgot how much it was in dead money in that contract, but it was enough to where they seriously could have gotten rid of him, but they've forced him to restructure. And so now he's going to be with the team for the 2021 season. That just came out today. Does that worry you about Elijah Moore? And who are some of these other guys kind of down here at the bottom that you think might? I mean, I've thought you mentioned Russell Gage a little bit earlier. I've thought about him. I've seen the reporting out of Chicago about the early deep connection between Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney. That's interesting to me. Paris Campbell, of course, is always interesting to me on the cheap. Amari Rodgers is another guy who I've thought a lot about. I mean, there are a lot of these guys you can make a good case for, even down to the Amon-Ra St. Browns. Are there any of those guys that I mentioned that kind of stick out to you that should be getting pushed up the cheat sheet to where they're getting consideration in the 14th round, or any others that I might not have mentioned?
Well, me, I'm still going to have some interest in Mike Williams here, Alex. And, I get that we saw that Keenan Allen truly was Justin Herbert's guy last year. And I get that we've, probably need to read the writing on the wall with Mike Williams and recognize after this amount of time kind of what he is in the NFL, which is kind of for fantasy purposes, basically been like a wide receiver 3 or a flex. That said, Justin Herbert being in the mix, I just think potentially changes things because there could be a lot to go around in year 2. And I still think he's competing. The other guys are Jared Cook and Trey McKitty and Donald Parham. And then was it Jalen Guyton? And there was one other receiver last year.
They drafted Josh Palmer.
I think it's pretty clear that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are far and away the lead pass catchers on this offense. And I think you look back to last year, Mike Williams' production, not unusually for him, was a bit spotty, but he had some monster breakouts. So we've been tantalized with some real upside we've seen with Mike Williams in the NFL, and specifically last year tied to Justin Herbert. And so I think you could make a calculation that he's clearly in the top 2 pass catchers for one of my favorite quarterbacks in the entire NFL. And there should be more to go around from Herbert this year, and possibly a bit of an increased chemistry between him and Williams, even though it was really all the Keenan Allen show last year. So, is he more than a wide receiver 3 or flex? Maybe not, but I can still buy in on him being attached to Justin Herbert with the upside that he's shown there. I like that you mentioned Mooney and Paris Campbell. Mooney's a guy I've liked in all offseason. I think he's super sneaky. Obviously, it's going to be an interesting situation with the quarterback. And I think we've still got Allen Robinson there, and, Anthony Miller's still there, a guy, it'd be interesting to see what happens in training camp. Amari Rodgers, I don't think you can get too excited about until we know more about Aaron Rodgers. But if we start to feel good there, I think there's a lot of reason to love, or to at least be interested in Amari Rodgers as a rookie. I can make a case for John Brown. I mean, to me, he lives maybe up closer to the Nelson Aguilar type territory. I mean, I know we're kind of seeing what's happening with Ruggs and Bryan Edwards. I mean, by the way, either of them could be bounced back like sleeper candidates, especially kind of Ruggs in my mind, I think is an interesting guy that can probably be had for free. But it feels like John Brown's going to walk in as the veteran and probably be the lead wide receiver in that offense. And, Derek Carr is ultimately, I know Gruden wants to run it, but Carr's pretty good at chucking the football around. So I think John Brown is definitely going to have some flex appeal. And then maybe the only other guy that I see here that's really standing out to me, Alex, is, I've seen some folks getting pretty high on Terrace Marshall here kind of during the dead part of the season. And, I get that he's got legitimate competition at the wide receiver position there, but I mean, there is a real chance he comes in and is equally as talented as the other 2 starters. And he's the one guy with the big frame that I think we can get a little bit more excited about as a height, speed, weight specimen over there in Carolina.
All right. So let's go over to the mock draft simulator, and I'm going to use version 1.3 of the PPR cheat sheet. You see, it's the Draft Wizard and Fantasy Pros is finally added in the pre-draft rankings from Yahoo, ESPN, NFL.com. The composite ADPs you can use from Fantrax, RT Sports, FF Calculator, and the composite best ball ADPs. Also, the expert rankings over there. So you can draft against this stuff. We're going to do a PPR league, a snake draft of 12 teams, 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 2 flex of wide receiver, running back, tight end. This is a PPR draft. Is there a spot you want me to pick from, Byron? I want you to see a sim and tell me what you think before we get out of here.
Let's go from the 9 spot.
All right. So from the 9 hole. All right. So this is 1.3. This is test 2 after I made the switch at the top with some of those guys in the Devontae Adams tier. And we'll see how the sheet goes. Always a trip doing this live in front of everybody, but the sheet's been good. I've done hundreds of these simulations. It's been okay. So let's kind of see what we have here.
The trick's usually on our opponents when we use the cheat sheet, man.
1.09. So Zeke Elliott fell here. So maybe we should. It's just kind of like we were talking about earlier. Maybe we should kind of leave it how it was ADP wise if he's fallen to 9. We don't probably need to push him up to 5th or 6th on the list. Here we have a decision. We did have a decision. I'm so used to there being a decision between Cam Akers and Calvin Ridley. We moved Calvin Ridley down on this sheet, so we'll just go ahead and go with Cam Akers. Here with the 2nd round pick, we will have a decision here, I do believe, between Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Amari Cooper. I don't really want to go with Go with Clyde.
Let's see what happens.
If we go with Clyde, we're gonna have a 4 running back start. You don't mind? We will have a 4 running back start.
I just love CeeDee Lamb so much better than Amari Cooper.
All right, let's see what happens. We're gonna have a 4 running back start here. We'll just know that we could have gone Amari Cooper in this draft if things go completely sideways.
There's Lamb right there.
Let's see if he falls to the next one. I do not think he'll fall to the 5th round, to the late 5th, but we'll see if he does. We'll take Miles Sanders here with this pick. Yeah, this thing's going to go a little bit weird, but hopefully the cheat sheet knows that we're going to be able to pick up wide receivers later. Here we're going to take Travis Etienne, so five running backs here to start. Thankfully, we'll get our first wide receiver. I like getting Cortland Sutton. I feel like he's probably set for a bounce back. Are we going to – and then, so the cheat sheet knew we're going to get some wide receivers here. We get Tyler Boyd as our wide receiver 2. Certainly like that, especially at pick 7.09 in a PPR format. Makes some sense to me. We'll have a choice here between Javonte Williams and Jarvis Landry. I think at this point we probably just want to go Jarvis. Right? Okay.
Yep.
Here we have another choice between Laviska Shenault and Gus Edwards. We're pretty heavy on running backs, but do you just want to get your guy Gus?
No, Visca's one of my guys too, man. I went to that Colorado Pro Day.
Okay,
so
let's see we get Laviska, and we'll see if Gus can fall to us. If he doesn't, maybe Tony Pollard will fall. Gus is going to fall. There we go. So we're going to get Gus.
The sickness.
So this team is turning out to be sick. I'm glad I trusted the cheat sheet here. Aguilar.
I like these next couple picks on the I see up here.
Aguilar and Logan Thomas have been moved to the same line, even though this is 99 and 102. But I believe if you look at the sheet, there's 3 on this same line. So let's just go Logan Thomas.
I love that pick.
Okay, let's just go.
What an underrated pick that is right now.
Yeah. And at the end of the 11th, that really is good. Nelson Aguilar. So the cheat sheet knew we're going to be able to pick up some of these wide receivers that we really like here right at the very end.
And I knew the cheat sheet would know.
Yeah. The one thing is that Trey Lance has been moved and Mecole Hardman here at the very end. The one thing is that Trey Lance has been moved up as sort of a guy who you take as a backup quarterback. So that's going to be a little bit of a weakness here. It was like if I was using the cheat sheet to draft this team, I might just draft Baker Mayfield instead of Trey Lance, because generally you would have had a quarterback by now, and Trey Lance would be your quarterback too, so you're sort of upside stash. But so we could take him. That's what the cheat sheet says. And if we don't like him, we got guys like Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz, all these other guys are going to be on the –
take him, put him on the bench. Maybe he'll break out like Justin Herbert did midseason last year.
So we'll just take him.
And by the way, that was a league winner last year.
So you look at that team, you feel real sick. So the quarterback's Trey Lance. Like we said, we could have had, Baker Mayfield, could have had Carson Wentz, could have had some of these other guys. The running backs are Ezekiel Elliott, Cam Akers, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Travis Etienne, Gus Edwards. Those are the running backs. The wide receivers are Cortland Sutton, Tyler Boyd, Jarvis Landry, Laviska Shenault, Nelson Aguilar, Mecole Hardman. The tight end is Logan Thomas. That's a well-balanced team. All I did was use the cheat sheet. Version 1.3. Byron, what do you think? Is the skeleton at least off to some kind of start here?
Total beatdown, man. I'm very encouraged. Good work, Alex.
All right.